Hey everyone, welcome back, and thanks so much for watching. I really loved reading your comments and listening to your name suggestions for the podcast. We still haven't decided yet, so keep your comments coming. Also, I love the suggestions on different shows and guests you'd like to have on. So I'm taking all of that into consideration, and I'm excited to get going again. So today I'm just going to talk about how I got into real estate. I get that question a lot, and people want to know a little bit more about my background. So, first of all, I just want to tell you, I think it's a little bit in my DNA. My dad was a real estate broker. He'd actually worked for General Motors for years. He had transferred to Arizona, working for General Motors, and then later decided to go into real estate. And I just remember when I was a little girl, I'm going to date myself here because there were these MLS magazines. And so, obviously, this is before the days of, all the internet and everything. So, what they would do is they'd print these like magazines, and there would just be like a picture of a home, and it would say, 3 bedroom, 2 bath, and it would give the address and a price. And I just remember always going to my dad's office and like reading through those magazines. I was probably like 8 years old. And I would ask him, why is this 3 bedroom house more expensive than this 3 bedroom house? And anyway, I still even remember he had this one home that was on the market forever, it seemed like. And it was on Fairview. I still even remember the street. And he had several open houses. And I remember I'd always ask if I would get to go. And I would say, can I go to the open house with you? And I realized later in life that most 8-year-olds don't ask to go and hang out in an open house, but I thought it was really like cool and fun. And so, anyway, I just remember being around my dad quite a bit and kind of just being around real estate. So I was always interested in it. Skipping forward, I just always kind of watched homes and what things were selling for. I went to school in Utah, stayed in Utah, got married. We had our family, and while Brent and I were just students, we both had graduated, and we decided to buy our first house. And our friends were buying in a neighborhood in Lehigh, and we just said, "Yeah, I think we want to do that too." And so we really didn't know what we were doing. And that's one of the reasons I feel really strongly about even starting this podcast and also just helping people because I didn't really have a mentor and I didn't even really think to ask my dad much about it. And at the time, he had had a different career. He had moved into commercial appraising. And so we just didn't really ask him a lot of questions. And I didn't really have a mentor. I didn't have anybody to ask. And so I just remember we walked into this model home and we said, okay, yeah, we'll buy it. And they built our house in about 3 months. It was actually really crazy. And it was start to finish in 3 months. And anyway, and I remember, by the way, for the interest rate, we were so excited, and it was 7 7/8. I still remember that. And like my parents thought it was like the most amazing interest rate ever. They were like, I can't believe you're getting an interest rate for under, 10%. And their first loan had been at like 15%. So that's why I just kind of laugh when we look at interest rates today and we complain, historically, they've been higher. And so anyway, I just remember my interest rate was 7 7/8, and the house was $100,000. By the way, it was like $99,000 in West Lehigh. It was about 1,500 square feet, so not real huge. We didn't have a basement, and anyway, I just kind of watched the market. Though it was a really good investment for us. We lived there for a few years, and then I just knew it was time to move. And again, I just didn't have really a mentor. And so I remember even signing the loan docs. I didn't even really know what we were doing, but I was like, okay, I'm just going to trust this is the right thing. And it ended up being good. With our second house, we ended up buying a lot in Northeast Lehigh, and we hired a general contractor. And as we started the process, all of a sudden he went bankrupt. And so I had one kid. I think at the time I was actually pregnant with Carter, and I had Andrew. And so I just remember having like morning sickness and a 2-year-old and being pregnant. And then my contractor goes bankrupt, and I didn't really know what to do. We even had like a sheriff sign at one point in the front yard. It was like this like hot pink sign. I'm like, what is this? And it's like, oh, we're going to auction off this house. And I was like, whoa, what happened? And so I had to pick up learning about construction. And luckily, I was fluent in Spanish. And it kind of fell to me because Brent was working. And so I'm like, well, I guess I'm generaling out the rest of this house. And so I ended up being the general contractor for pretty much the whole house until the end. And so I learned a lot about construction. I learned a lot of new vocabulary. And we finished out the house, and it ended up turning out great. In fact, at one point, one of my neighbors was like, "Maybe you should be a general contractor." And I was like, "Whoa, not right now, because I've got like two kids going on. Like, that's just going to be too much for me." So, anyway, I still love construction. And if you know me right now, I do actually quite a bit in construction, a lot of new construction, renos, all of those things. So usually when I walk people through, I can tell people, oh, here's what needs to be fixed, here's what doesn't. And so anyway, that was kind of how I got my kind of real estate and construction background. And then I started doing mortgage origination. And this would have been back in probably about 2004, probably. So I did that for a few years from home. And I learned a lot about just kind of mortgages. I mainly called, it was a refinance period of time where a lot of people were refinancing rates because they were down below 6%, by the way. So it was a big thing. And I was just doing this mortgage origination and kind of calling on these leads. And it was a good job work from home. And then I remember there was a lot of just kind of weird things happening in the market. And if you've watched all the films, like, there's like The Big Short, or there's different things out there where they talk a little bit about what was happening with the financial world. I started seeing things that were red flags. And at the time, I even at one point had a realtor come to me, and he um, wanted me to do this, kind of this help with this loan for one of his clients. And he said to me, because I said, well, what's their, can you give me their social security number? And he was like, well, And I was like, okay, what do I know? And he's like, well, and I didn't have any clue what he was talking about. And then he's like, just make one up. And I was like, whoa, I don't do that. And I remember I told him, I said, I'm not that person. And he said, well, I'll find someone who is, because they want this house. And so I remember just seeing some things, like I said, or it felt really weird and icky. And like there were people that you could just tell there were weird things in the market. And I joke around actually with Brent a lot and say, yeah, I should do like a little Netflix show instead of The Big Short, where all these people were predicting the market. I predicted it, but I was like the stay-at-home mom, that was doing this. And I remember I actually told Brent, I said, hey, this is kind of going to collapse. Like, we need to do something right now, because this is not looking good. There's just a lot of weird things happening in the market. And so what we ended up doing is we did like a cash out refi on our house. And we took that equity, and I said, I just want to put it in the bank, because when everything collapses, then that way we've got our equity, we have it in the bank, and we can kind of decide what we want to do, because we knew we were probably going to move in the next few years. And so we did this cash out refi. We pulled about, this $100,000 out of our house, put it in the bank, just sitting there. And then the market collapsed about 6 months later. And so then when the market collapsed, we were there. Brent had been in IT, so he had a very steady job. I believe he was at Microsoft even at the time. And so we were one of the only people that really qualified for a loan going forward. So like when the crash happened in about 2007, we just kind of waited it out. And then in about 2009, we were looking at actually going to Australia for a few months. That's another whole story. But we basically said, okay, let's, kind of sell the house. So meanwhile, we had already pulled out that money, was sitting there. It was a time where people were just making lowball offers, just at whatever, but they were looking up how much you owed on the house. And so we had somebody that looked at how much we owed on the house. They called us and they gave us an offer basically for that price. And meanwhile, we had that extra money in the bank. So we qualified for a loan. I'll never forget this. We had to send in 120 pages of documentation in order to get the loan, just because it was such a weird time. And if it wouldn't have been for Brent's work history, we probably wouldn't have qualified. And so, anyway, at the time, I even joked around and told my husband, hey, maybe we should just go rent a townhome and then go buy like 10 lots. I'm kind of mad I didn't do that actually, but then we could have just really made a lot of money. So instead, we found this other house that had gone into foreclosure. It was a new build. Um, it needed a little bit of kind of renovation, and there somebody had come through and actually taken out, like they broke the cabinets. It was really weird, and there were wasp nests in there. It was a really nice house in Highland, on the Highland and Alpine border. But it had just, people had taken out the appliances, the speaker system, like it needed some help. And I just remember there was like 2 inches of dust everywhere in the house. The people that had built it had kind of a unique taste. They had painted the walls gray, and all the trim in the house was black. And there were these bright red walls, orange walls, yellow walls. Like it was really kind of interesting. You could actually see the footprints as you walked in the door, and people made it about 10 steps in and then left. Like there were no footprints past 10 feet, because there was a lot of kind of construction that needed to happen. The backyard, there was no yard work done, just a lot of things that were happening with that house. But I loved the floor plan. We loved the neighborhood. And I told Brent, I said, hey, let's see if we can get this house. And we paid $57 a square foot for the house, which is crazy. And basically, they had other offers along the way, and they hadn't taken them, and they were for much higher offer, like it was a higher amount. But over that 2-year period, they had just basically thought the market would go up. Finally, it went into foreclosure, and so they were just like, we want to get rid of this. And so we came in, we made an offer, and they didn't like it, but we basically gave them a timeline, and we said, look, we have to get a house. Our other house is sold. We're one of the only people qualified right now to actually get a mortgage, because people don't realize at that time, people just did not qualify. So we just said, we're here, we can close. And so they ended up finally taking our offer. Probably not happy about it, but they took our offer. And so then we took on that house, and we took on a lot of construction projects with that house as well. So skipping forward even beyond that was funny. My realtor at the time, he now owns a really large brokerage in the state of Utah. He was newer, and he basically told me, he's like, why are you not in real estate? And throughout my whole life, people had asked me that, because I always was pretty savvy about where to buy, when to buy. And he's like, you should go into real estate. And at the time, I was like, I've got kids, I'm at home, I'm, kind of busy. I'd gotten into education. As some of you know, I was later on the state school board. I was involved with charter schools and immersion programs as well. And so I was pretty much in that world. Later, that morphed into politics. And so anyway, I really just did my own real estate investing, and again, kind of construction. And I had a lot of construction to do on that house. And right now, I'm really proud of that house. Sometime I'll have to show before and after pictures of it. But I did a huge remodel on that house. And anyway, kind of going forward, we ended up selling that house. And during that time, actually, while we still owned that house in Highland, Airbnb kind of came about. And that was when it was new on the market. Like people were like, what's Airbnb? And people had heard, oh, well, are you sleeping on somebody's couch? Or like, because that's actually how Airbnb started, if you're not aware of kind of the background. And so people were like, are you staying at other people's homes? And I had told Brent, I said, I think we should, buy a house, like a small one somewhere down in St. George, maybe. And it was just kind of a new thing. And so at the time, I was working for Governor Herbert, and we went down for a golf tournament, and they'd had a cancellation for somebody to come and play. And I called my husband, Brent, and I said, hey, why don't you come down, play golf? You could have fun. And by the way, we're going to buy a house while you're here. And he was like, what? And I said, they are selling these new Airbnb homes like at the golf course, and they can be rented out nightly. And I said, so we're going to, just know we're going to maybe sign on one. He's like, what? I thought it was coming down for golf. So he came down for golf. Then next thing we knew, we didn't sign on just one, we actually bought two. We bought two next door to each other because the market was slow at the time and we got just an incredible deal. I think we spent like 275 on each home. And they were really small, but I knew that we would want to put in like several bathrooms, almost like having mini suites. And so we had a 5 bedroom, 4 bath, and a 4 bedroom, 4 bath. And they were like about 2,000 square feet each. And so that's how we got going, kind of an Airbnb. So we started with those. And I joke around and I say I did everything wrong on those homes. So I became an expert because I've made all the mistakes. And that's one reason I help people right now, because I'm like, please don't make some of the mistakes that we made. And we made a lot of, we didn't really know what we were doing. So we even bought furniture and kind of we were dragging it down there, and some of it broke in transit. I mean, we have all sorts of crazy stories, but we were really overall successful in getting those rented, and those just, it was really kind of fun. It's a community. It was in the early days, and we really enjoyed having those. And so we had both of those homes down there, and then after a little while, management kind of shifted, and then they took over actually management. So we ended up switching to another area. But in the meanwhile, I had people calling me, and some of my friends knew that we had these Airbnbs, and so they said, "Hey, will you?" Help us. And so I started helping people and giving them advice on where to buy one, what to do, even when it came down to the furniture. And at the time, I was working for Governor Herbert. And I remember he said to me, he's like, "Why are you just not doing real estate? You're already doing real estate." And in the meanwhile, I'd also found a home for one of my friends in Highland. And I said, "Hey, like my one friend bought my other friend's house." And I'd kind of lined it all up. And anyway, so then I finally was like, you know what? Maybe after this last campaign for Governor Herbert, I'll get my license. So right after his campaign in 2016, I got my real estate license. And my first client was actually myself, because I thought if I mess up anything, then it's on me. So I ended up selling that house that I had talked about at the beginning of just in Highland that we'd bought during the meltdown, and we did really well on it. And I remember I actually made a really good friend in the process. Her brother bought it, and we actually still work together sometimes at the same brokerage today. And I just remember at the very beginning, I just told her I was so nervous, and I said, "Hey, I just want you to know," she was talking to me in acronyms, and she was saying all these things, and I had no idea what she was talking about. And she called me and she's like, and we had just listed the house, and we listed it. We got the highest price by about $20 a square foot more than anybody else in the neighborhood. Um, because I had staged it, I had done a lot of work on it, a lot of preparation. So when we went to go list it, we listed it on like a Friday night, and I just had this feeling, like even when to list it. I kept telling my family, I'm like, we are listing this on this one Saturday or this one Friday in April. And so anyway, then the next morning, my friend Jen, my friend now, Jen, at the time I didn't know her, but she was a realtor. She called me up and she's like, "I think this is the house for my brother." They came through at 8:30 in the morning on a Saturday, which never happens. And he was catching a flight. And so then she called me and she's asking me all these questions and acronyms, and she's using all this. And finally I said, um, I don't want to, like, interrupt you, but I don't know what you're talking about because I am a new realtor and I don't know what I'm doing yet. And then I remember I told her, I said, "And so please just don't take advantage of me because I don't know what I'm doing." So anyway, we became friends through the whole transaction. And she said, and by the way, when I had started my real estate also probably entirely wrong. I started, just this is my personal opinion, but I had started at a flat fee brokerage that I didn't really have a lot of training and resources available. I didn't have a lot of mentors where I'd started at. And so I also had said, "Oh, I'm just going to do this part time. I'm, just going to see how this goes." And she told me, she came back and was like, "You need to do this full time. You're really good at it, and you should do this full time." And I said, okay, well, let me give that some thought. And so then after a little while, I was like, I had a neighbor call me and they said, hey, we want you to list our house because I had gotten the top dollar. Like I'd kind of surprised everybody in my neighborhood at how much I got for the house. And like I said, it was more than, $20 more a square foot than anyone else. And so it was substantially more. And so my neighbor called me and said, hey, we want you to list our house. And I was like, okay, yes, I'll do that. And what the biggest compliment that they gave me actually at the end of the transaction, I helped them, and it was, I just loved those clients of mine. They were my first clients, and they were moving to California, and they had owned several homes through their lives. They were retired, and they said, "We just want you to know you were actually our best realtor we've ever used," and that was such a huge compliment to me. And I still stay in touch with them. Very amazing people, and they just said, you just have a real knack for this. You just helped us, and we really appreciated it. And after that, I just thought, you know what? I love what I do. I do love real estate, and I just received my master's degree. I just finished my master's degree. And I just thought, you know what? This is a good time for me to shift into real estate. And so I ended up going into real estate full time. Meanwhile, I'd also been helping my friends with their Airbnbs and investment properties. So that's why I started in two markets at the same time, which I don't always recommend, but in my case, that's just what I was doing. So I had half my business in St. George, half my business in kind of along the Wasatch Front. And so both businesses grew at the same time. And then what most people don't know, and a lot of you don't know, is that then we started a furniture business. And we still have that furniture business. It's grown, it's down in St. George, and it's called Red Rock Furniture. And we specialize in doing vacation homes and Airbnb specifically. We have a full time designer, and she has done a lot of nightly rentals. So we know like what to put in a nightly rental because that matters. Let me tell you, because I've made a lot of mistakes. My first Airbnbs, I put very cheap furniture in. It fell apart. I threw out a lot of furniture even in the first year of having my house down there. And then also, we didn't use like stain resistant materials for like the couches. And so we went into this furniture business, and we had actually looked at starting a rug store in Lehigh. This is stuff that people don't know. So we had looked at even starting this rug business in Lehigh. And so we shifted it, and we'd been kind of following the furniture industry for several years. And we basically just said, you know what, there's this real need, because I had clients then buying nightly rental homes, and they'd come to me and say, hey, now what do I do to furnish it? And some of them that hired a designer, these designers, and I love designers, but the designers were taking 6 to 12 months to do the design. Some of them charge upwards of even $50,000. And I was just like, this is crazy, because if you're an investor, every dollar counts for your investment in order to get it back. And so what we do at Red Rock is, even now, we have a flat fee. So basically, we charge $2,000 to $5,000 depending on the size of the house. That's your whole design fee. So we just do the design for a flat fee. We also are very quick. And so we plan your house out really quickly. We put things in that are going to last. And it doesn't mean that they're more expensive. In fact, some of the clients we've had have come back and said, you're actually cheaper than some of these big box stores. And we now have a designer that's put it all together. And if you go and you look at the research, if you actually have your place professionally designed, you usually rent at least a third more often, and you get about 35% more money on your nightly rate as well, because people want to see, they're on vacation. They don't want something that's just, oh, hey, I got my grandma's couch and I threw it in. And in the early days of Airbnb, to be clear, that actually did work, because it was early. People were just like, oh, I need a place to crash. And so that kind of worked to have that. But now it's funny, but kind of I'm on a tangent right now. But what's interesting is during COVID, there was a big shift in Airbnbs. And it went from, okay, a place to kind of crash, to where people wanted just a really relaxing place. They also wanted it to be a little more aesthetic. They were like, hey, if I'm going to be here for a week, I want it they were putting pictures of Instagram, like on Instagram, and they wanted, like even in our backyard, it's like, hey, they want a picture of a palm tree because a lot of people are coming from even other like states or other countries, and they want to just be, having fun as well. And I'm going to do a future episode on also how to design and decorate an Airbnb if you have one, just because there are a lot of mistakes people make just in that alone, because not just on the quality side or what you're putting in, but even just on the design in general, because people put in like white couches or they kind of go boring. And you really want to be just fun because it's a place of vacation. So going back, we kind of started that furniture business. We just mainly did it for our clients. And then just in the last few years, we've shifted to now where we help agents, property management companies. We have agents that refer their clients to us. The property management companies love us because we get things done really quickly. We just did an 8-bedroom home this last month. I'll maybe spotlight it. It's amazing. And we did start to finish in a little over a month. And that was from the design phase to the implementation. And we even do like, the plates, the cups, like we can make it completely turnkey. So we work with a lot of investors as well. So those two go hand in hand. And so kind of going back to my business, I do quite a bit in the nightly rental world. We call it STR, or short term rental. So Airbnb, whatever you'd like to call it. So that's a portion of my business, and then also with the furniture, that's also running. We're looking at actually starting that up north, and then in Heber, we've done a few homes in kind of the Heber Park City area as well. So if you're looking at that, definitely call me. But then going back, I also got into luxury homes because the first home I sold, my house was it was a home over $1 million, and my first client was as well. And so I went into luxury. One of the questions I get often though is that people say, well, do you work with first time home buyers? And I love working with first time home buyers. So I love it when people ask me that question. Because for me, I love doing it because I remember the time when I was buying my first house and I had no mentor, and you can make a lot of mistakes. And people, depending on where you're buying, what you're buying, that matters. And so, what I like to do is I love working with first time home buyers because I feel really strongly about it actually. And even if you don't think you're qualified, most people actually are qualified and they don't even know it. And one other thing I'd like to just say is a lot of people, I know your parents, if you've asked them, they'll tell you, hey, save up 20% for a down payment. And there's very conservative people out there. And I consider myself a conservative investor. But I'm also a smart investor. And you have to be careful because now what's happening is if you are saving up that 20% down payment, first of all, it's not necessary. There are home loans out there where you can even get in with 0%. There's grant programs. Sometimes, you can even get in at like 3.5% down, 0%. Obviously, 20% is great because then you don't have mortgage insurance. But the reason it's better to get into a home first is because if you're looking at a graph, and I'll have to find that data and post it, but the market is outpacing your ability to save in most situations. And so the market will price you out, and you're actually going to get a smaller home and qualify for less over time. Plus, that doesn't include the inflation factor as well, because your cash is being, it's depreciating. And so, when I work with a lot of senior couples, some of them are leaving to serve like some like a church service mission or something for their churches, and or maybe they're doing something and they have a tendency to sell their home and then not reinvest in the market, which is a huge mistake because they'll sell their home and then when they get back in a year and a half, they can't buy the home that they just sold. And so it's really important if whether you're starting the first time of buying a new home or whether you're a senior couple, call me because I have some very strong feelings, and I could tell you stories where I've helped several families where they've come back and they haven't been able to buy a home or as big of a home, and it's been a real challenge. So whatever you do, don't sell your home without talking to me. So, but anyway, going back to first time home buyers, I love helping first time home buyers, and it's just important to know and understand a lot about the market. And I love helping them because it's just your beginning stages. And most likely you're going to be buying several different homes, over the course of your life. And again, that it's so important to start right and buy the right thing. Too often people will say, oh, well, I called my brother, or we're buying my family member's house. A lot of times they're overpaying for things. It's a common mistake. Everyone thinks their house is usually worth more, and they love their house. And their house is great, but it's good to make sure that's the right thing for you. So anyway, that's basically when I get asked about my real estate career, kind of this history, but I do luxury first time homebuyers. And one of the things that I'm very passionate about too is treating everyone with the same level of respect. And the questions are never bad questions. Any question is a great question. And so if you have questions, send them to me. And we can even address those on this podcast in future episodes as well. I'm also going to have some lenders that come on. I'm going to have some different guests that can talk to you about different things in the real estate market or related there as well. But it's important to ask those questions and get a plan. And again, you don't want the market outpacing you. So even right now, a lot of people have been on the sidelines that can afford because they've been saying, oh, I don't want to buy a house right now because interest rates are really high. And again, that's when I'm going to go back and say, actually, historically, they really are not that high. And the other thing is we kind of have this phrase where we'll say, date the rate, marry the home. And you really need to purchase the home because right now your pricing is actually pretty low. And then you've also have interest rates that are dropping right now. So right now is just an amazing time to buy because there's still some good inventory on the market. What I am afraid of is now that we've, had some drops in interest rates, the builders have not been building to keep up with the growth. And so over the last 2 years, and even really since COVID, when the supply chain issues were really difficult and it took a long time to build homes, we really have not kept up with growth. And so I foresee in the future, and probably in the next few years, we may go back to what was that multiple offer phase, which was good and bad in a lot of ways. And so, I'm also not looking forward to those days when we have a shortage of inventory. So right now we have I think, a healthy market. This is a great time to buy. I've had people call me and say, oh, I'm waiting around for some big crash. I'm just not seeing it happen. I have steady business. The indicators all around, we have good employment. I'm just not seeing that. And the thing that hurts you the most is not getting into the market. And so you need to get into the market, whether first time home buyer, whether, you're an investor and maybe you just are thinking, hey, this is maybe the time for me to buy. It absolutely is. I'm even buying a home myself right now. I'm buying another investment property. And that usually shows you most realtors are right now. And that's an indicator that it's great for our clients as well. So anyway, if whatever questions you have in your comments, I've loved reading your comments and your suggestions for the show. Definitely send those to me. I love interacting. And the next time in the future, actually in the near future, we're going to have some guests. I have the greatest friends and I have the greatest clients. I have really interesting people around me. And I feel very fortunate to have so many of you in my life. And I'm excited to have you on the show and talk about your areas of expertise, your interests. And I'm excited to get going. So thanks again for everything. And I'll see you soon.